You're sitting in your kitchen at midnight, staring at a moldy patch on the ceiling right above your kid's bed, and your landlord still hasn't fixed the pipes after 3 weeks of asking. You need to move out. You need to move out tonight, but you're terrified you'll be sued for the rest of the year's rent. You've heard horror stories about broken leases, but I'm going to show you how a regular guy named Mike handled this exact situation, walked away clean, and didn't pay a dime in penalties. You can use his exact playbook. Mike was a mechanic working double shifts to support his family. He rented an older apartment, and right when winter hit, things went bad. First, the bathroom sink backed up. Then the baseboard heater started leaking, and soon a thick, dangerous mold started spreading across the bedroom wall. His landlord kept promising to send someone, but nobody ever showed up. Mike's daughter started coughing constantly. Mike couldn't stay there anymore, but he still had 8 months left on his lease. He packed up his family, moved into a new place, and sent a very specific text message to his landlord, which I'll explain later. He didn't pay any termination fee. He didn't pay the remaining 8 months of rent. He got his security deposit back, and the landlord let him walk away. How did he do it? He used a legal concept called constructive eviction, which means the property became so unsafe and unlivable that the law treats it as if the landlord kicked you out, even if you're the one who packed the boxes. Every state has a baseline legal rule that fundamentally shapes your lease, called the implied warranty of habitability. That phrase sounds incredibly fancy, but it's actually very simple. It means a landlord must provide a safe, livable environment. The property must have running water, working heat in the winter, safe electrical wiring, and basic sanitation. It also must be free from major hazards, like severe mold, dangerous structural damage, or severe and ongoing pest infestations. If the place fails this test, the law considers the lease broken by the landlord, not by you. The critical part is that you can't just leave the moment something breaks. You have to follow the rules, or the court will treat it as an illegal abandonment. Abandonment means leaving the rental property before the lease ends without a legal excuse, and if you do that, you'll owe the rent for every month left on your contract. To avoid that trap, you have to build a paper trail. Mike kept every single text message he ever sent to his landlord about the mold. He took clear photos of the spreading damage. He even grabbed a cheap indoor air quality test kit to prove the mold was a severe hazard. If you're dealing with a problem like this right now, start by checking the exact notice laws for your state. Notice is a formal heads up that you're giving a landlord, usually in writing, that something is broken. You have to give the landlord a reasonable amount of time to fix the problem. In some states, that's specifically 7 days. In other states, it's 14 days, or sometimes it's just legally defined as a reasonable time for the repair based on the specific emergency. During those freezing winter months, a broken heater might legally require a fix in 24 hours. A dripping kitchen faucet, though, might legally allow the landlord 2 weeks. Since laws vary heavily by state, you need to look up your specific local notice requirements before you take action. Once you send that written notice, the clock starts ticking. If the landlord ignores the problem, you reach your next option. You have to be careful, because if you leave too early, the landlord can sue you for breaking the lease. Sometimes, the problem isn't a broken pipe, but a dangerous neighbor. Let's talk about another major exception to a lease, called the right to quiet enjoyment. That legal rule means you've the right to live in your rental home in total peace, without the landlord or other tenants causing severe, ongoing disruptions. Imagine your downstairs neighbor is dealing drugs, slamming doors all night, and threatening you in the hallway. You complain to the landlord in writing, but they do nothing to evict the bad neighbor. Let's say you move out with 6 months left on your lease and you don't pay a termination fee. The landlord has a strict legal duty to actively look for a new tenant. If they find someone new after just 1 month, you only owe rent for that one empty month. If the landlord gets lazy and leaves the apartment totally empty for the entire 6 months without even putting up a for rent sign, most judges will completely throw out their claim against you because the landlord failed to mitigate their damages. But here's the real danger. If the landlord honestly tries to rent the place out, runs ads every week, and still can't find a tenant in the slow market, you still owe the rent for every single month that remains empty. You're taking a huge gamble if you leave without a solid, legally backed excuse. That's why many people in this situation use a strategy called subletting. Subletting is when you find a brand new person to move in, take over the space, and pay the rent directly to the landlord for you. You essentially become a matchmaker for your own apartment. However, you have to read your lease very carefully. Many rental contracts strictly prohibit subletting, meaning you can't legally do it without the landlord's written permission. If you try to sneak someone in illegally, you could easily face an eviction. An eviction is a formal court process where a judge orders you to leave the property, and it will absolutely ruin your rental history for years. So, how do you put all this together if you need to leave today? Let's go back to Mike and his mold problem. Mike did 4 specific things that completely protected him in the eyes of the law, and you can use his exact playbook. First, he provided written notice. He sent a certified letter, which is a special type of mail that requires the landlord to sign a green card proving they received it. This is your absolute proof of delivery. Second, he gave the landlord a legally reasonable amount of time to fix the severe problem. Third, he carefully documented everything with clear photos, videos, and a cheap hardware store air quality test. Fourth, he moved his family to safety only after the property became legally unlivable. If you're standing in an unsafe situation right now, take out your phone and start recording. Email those photos and videos to yourself immediately so they're permanently timestamped. Send your landlord a formal written notice today. Don't rely on a quick phone call or a casual conversation in the hallway. Written communication is your only shield in a courtroom. One final warning before you pack your bags. People often confuse minor annoyances with legally valid reasons to break a lease. If the landlord takes 4 days to fix your garbage disposal, that's annoying, but it's not a breach of the warranty of habitability. If your neighbor plays loud music on a Friday night, that's a nuisance, but it's not a breach of quiet enjoyment unless you carefully document a long, ongoing pattern of severe disruption and your landlord completely ignores your written complaints. If you break a lease over a minor annoyance, the court will treat it as an illegal abandonment. Abandonment means leaving the rental property before the lease ends without a legal excuse, and the judge will rule against you. You need to be completely honest with yourself about the severity of your actual situation. If your life or your health is in genuine danger and the landlord refuses to act, that's when you pack up and leave. If it's just a frustrating inconvenience, you need to negotiate directly with the landlord. You can ask them politely if they'd be willing to let you break the lease if you forfeit your security deposit. The security deposit is the cash you paid up front when you first moved in, usually equal to 1 month's rent. Sometimes, giving up $1,000 right now is much cheaper than getting sued for 6 months of unpaid rent down the road. If you're deeply unsure about whether your specific situation qualifies as legally unlivable, that's exactly when you need to pay a local attorney for a 1-hour consultation. They can look at your lease and tell you exactly where you stand. If you found out today that your landlord actually has a legal duty to provide a safe home, pass this video along to a buddy who is currently stressing over a leaky ceiling or a broken heater in their apartment. Make sure you subscribe to Scribble Law so you always know the exact rules of the game before a property manager tries to trap you in a bad lease. What is the worst landlord excuse you've ever heard for ignoring a necessary repair? Tell me down in the comments.